Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I mean, Mr Jones actually nailed it on the head. A government can use the tax system in a number of ways, Mr Chair, in a number of ways. And what the Labor government fundamentally believes, what's one of our basic principles and what Phil Goff has said many, many times. Sorry, I had a crystal ball there and I had a vision of about 6 months' time, Mr Foss. I apologise. What the Labor Party believes, the Labor government will be the next government that delivers a budget. And I can promise you, Mr Chair, I can promise you it will not have the same level of inequality as this one does. There is no doubt about that, Mr Foss. What the Labor Party believes, what the Labor Party has always believed, and what Mr Goff has said time and time again, and what he will continue to tell Mr Key when he meets him on the hustings, is that the tax system should be used for good. The tax system should be used to promote equality. The tax system should be used to promote fairness. That is what the tax system should be used to do. The tax system should not be used to reward those who actually don't need it. And let me give you one example. The CEO of Westpac Bank, when he looked at these rates, I think he probably would have been a little bit embarrassed, Mr Chair. He would have been a little bit embarrassed when the CEO of Westpac Bank received a tax cut of $5,000 a week. Now, I've got to ask, is that fair? Is that equitable? Is that what the sort of society that we want, where you've got some at the top who amass huge wealth? He's got a salary of about $5.2 million. About $5.2 million. Well, he's got an increase of $5,000, of about $5,000. Well, Minister, why don't you go and ask the Minister of Revenue, your Minister of Revenue, your IRD, that in fact, whose figures the government don't trust. The government doesn't trust the IRD's figures. So what it does is it's used the Treasury figures. What I think that minister should do is ask the IRD what the CEO of Westpac earns in the salary, how much he gets in his hand every week, and I think even that minister, even a minister on a cabinet salary, would be slightly disgusted, because I don't know of any way how to justify a tax cut of $5,000 a week, let alone the amount of money he is receiving in their hand every single month. In fact, I have no doubt it is more than the vast majority of his employees receive in a year. I have no doubt about that. But this is what Labor stands for. Labor stands for using the tax system to promote equality and fairness. And, Mr Chair, what I have heard with regard to these rates we're talking about, I've heard it from, what was that bloke from Hamilton called? What's his name? McIndoe. Mr McIndoe, Mr Woodhouse, that in fact the tax cuts have been fiscally neutral. And what do they quote? They quote a Deloitte report. Well, I can inform this House that Dr Bollard, who I have the utmost respect for, has sat in front of the FEC and said, well, actually they're not fiscally neutral. In fact, it cost us. In fact, this is what the last year's budget told us, that these tax costs were going to cost the country about $1 billion. But it's cost more than that, Mr Chair, and I'll tell you why it's cost more than that, because the Treasury got the figures wrong. In fact, last year GST receipts were down by about $270 million. This is what GST receipts were down by. And that equates to around about $2 billion in spending on goods and services. What this House was told is that these rates were neutral, that an increase in revenue from GST would easily match the amount of money, I think it was about $23 billion over the term of the government, would easily match the amount of money it was going to cost to implement these tax cuts. Well, that's wrong, because that has not been the case. In fact, $2 billion has been taken out of the economy since this tax switch, and that is shown by the drop in the drop in the GST receipts. And that is why, Mr Chair, I have grave concerns when the government actually used the tax revenue forecast put forward by the Treasury and not the IRD. That's why I have grave concerns that it is the forecast, Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member
Because
Stewart
the
Nash.
IRD has a...
Point of order.
Chair, I just ask you if you would be able to assure me that this member has not had more than his allowable number of calls in this debate.
I'll just check that for you.
Is that his fourth? This is his fourth. This is his last one.
This is the fourth call now. I call the honourable member Stewart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I know it seems like we've been talking about the inequality of the tax system for a long time, but it's not just me. I think it's the whole of the Labor Party. In fact, everyone on this side of the House has been talking about the inequality of these tax rates for a long, long time. And that minister may say it's boring. That minister may say it's boring, but I think for the vast majority of New Zealanders, they don't find it boring. They find it a little bit shameful. But, Mr Chair, as I was saying, one of the major concerns I have about the government using Treasury data and not the IRD data when it promotes its forecast is the fact that Bill English has stood up and said the government's going to create 170,000 new jobs. Bill English said the government's going to create 170,000 new jobs. And this is what these revenue forecasts are based on. But when he was questioned on the television this morning, where are they going to come from? Where are those 170,000 jobs going to come from? You know what he said? Well, commodity prices are going to go up, and I think there are going to be a lot of jobs created in the commodity sector. Well, that was a very enlightening comment, Mr Chair, and the reason I say that is because, in fact, the opposite is happening. And let me give you an example. In the forest industry, we are exporting a record number of unprocessed logs. What that is doing, it is causing major stress for domestic processors. Mills are closing, people are losing jobs. So the prediction of 170,000 new jobs is actually a little bit of a fallacy. I think it's let's hit it and hope. Let's close our eyes, pick a figure out, and let's hope like hell that if we say it long enough, the people will believe it. Because what the government believes is all they have to do is get to the election. All they have to do is get to the election. And if they get elected, which they won't, but all they have to do is get to the election and the people will believe us. Well, the people are not silly. And I think what has happened is this government for too long has treated the people of New Zealand with contempt. And I think what the people of New Zealand deserve to know is what is the plan for creating these 170,000 new jobs. Yeah, we admit there will be more jobs. There will be more jobs out of the reconstruction of Christchurch. But there won't be 170,000 new jobs, and that's just a one-off sort of event. It's not sustainable long-term economic growth, and this is why Michael Cullen delivered 9 budgets of surplus. Because Michael Cullen knew, that is a very good point. That is a very good point that Mr Foss brings up, because never before has there been such a discrepancy in Treasury figures and IRD figures. What happens when they're putting together the budget document is Treasury models it and IRD models it. And they make, similar sort of assumptions, as you'd imagine, but usually they're pretty close. They're pretty close. This time, $4 billion over 5 years. That is $4 billion over 5 years. And the government says there may be a little bit of risk around this. Well, that is the understatement of the century, Mr Chair. There is huge risk in the government's figures because the IRD has said you're going to be $4 billion short over 5 years. That is a major concern. But as I was saying, what Michael Cullen believed is the way you create economic growth is by creating jobs. It's by creating jobs. When you create jobs, people pay tax. When the government creates jobs, then the taxpayers pay tax. When taxpayers pay tax, you get revenue in. When the government gets revenue, it can pay down debt. That's what Michael Cullen did. Michael Cullen left this country in such sound shape that when the global financial crisis hit, the economy was doing okay. And despite the mismanagement of this government, despite the gross economic mismanagement of this government, the economy is in not too bad shape because Michael Cullen had 9 years of budget surplus based on employment, based on 3% unemployment. We now have double the unemployment thanks to that government than we had when Michael Cullen read his last budget. We have 150,000 people who are in fact not contributing. So all we want to see, Mr Chair, all we want to see was a plan. Was a plan for growth, was a plan for creating jobs, was a plan for creating jobs, because when there are jobs, people pay their tax. And that is my huge concern. Minister Dunn actually admitted that we haven't got a great middle class like they have in the United States. He said we have a very few up the top, but we haven't got that great middle class like they have in the States. And this is a major problem.
I call the honourable member